Wait, hang on.
We're on the air, believe it or not.
Oh,
Ed Dyer, Justin Jackson. We got bunches of stories to talk about. And me and Justin have been very busy all day long. Rough day. So we're going to get jumping right into some interesting science news, some interesting energy news, events, stuff happening on the moon, and politics, of course.
and I haven't seen any of these stories, so these will all be news to me.
Heck, I just put it together half an hour ago, so half of it's news to me. So we're going to have fun.
It just happened in the
I got
last
stories.
cutting edge things that happened in the last half hour.
I don't know about that, but it's developing world investments in renewables hitting records. The developing world doing great. The developed world not so great. Let's see, global trends, and this is the Global Trends in Renewable Energy Investment, 10th edition, UNEP, the Frankfurt School Collaborating Center of Climate Sensibility, Energy, and Bloomberg. I don't know what all that stuff adds up to, but global investment in new renewables at $266 billion.
That's a good chunk of change.
Yes, it is. Yeah, well, heck, we could probably build Science Island with that kind of money.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
At least the jacuzzis, anyway. And it says here, annual global investments in new renewables was more than double what they thought it might be, and double the more than 130 billion invested in coal and gas stations in 2015. So much more money going into renewables than gas, coal and gas, at least in the developing world. Let's see. Just as significantly, developing world investments in renewables top those of developed nations for the first time. Further falls in generation costs per megawatt hour, particularly in solar photovoltaics. Renewables, including large hydro, made up 54% of the added gigawatt capacity. Blah, blah, blah. 134 gigawatts renewable power added worldwide. More good news compared to 106 gigawatts in 2004 and only 87 gigawatts in 2013. Let's see. 2015, more attention was drawn to battery storage as an adjunct to solar and wind projects and to small-scale PV systems. Blah, blah, blah. Developing countries on the rise, led by China and India. Now, that's a little bit of they're putting China in there as a developing country.
That makes sense.
Energy, really? Yeah. Energy-wise?
Yeah. So the vast majority of the billion people in both of those countries live without things that we would consider a normal necessity of 50 years ago. Things like a refrigerator or even electricity isn't everywhere. Those things can, so in that sense, yeah, still developing. I suppose there's some percentage of the population that has to be able to have a microwave before it can be called a developed country.
It is. I mean, China's so big, got so many people. I mean, and like you say, I'm sure there's a big first world, third world divide. They could have, a couple of billion people living in their first world and, 10 times that many in the third world. It's really, really hard to get my head wrapped around anything. It says, however, that in the developed countries, investment in Europe was down 21%. United States was up 19% to 44 billion, and Japan is about the same. So good news, I guess Europe. And the thing with Europe, I'm thinking that the drop in oil prices, drop in gas prices, making that cheaper might be a reason why they really aren't converting or investing in converting.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it also explains why there's maybe less money spent in exploration. Now is not a good time to go get that dirty, expensive shale oil out of Alaska because it's, too cheap to just import it. So why would you even bother?
Yeah, it's the percentage is in the United States. What is it? Maybe 10% still, something like that. Pretty low, but trends upward. The only question is, how long will it take? It's inevitable. We're going to go to renewables. We get that battery. We get that great battery where you can just have one in your backyard, like people have a generator, and you can store energy in there for maybe 3 days, and you can get it out quickly. You can charge up your car in 5 minutes. When that happens, it's all over for coal and power, but I don't know when that's going to happen.
And actually, the really encouraging thing is it's not happening too soon in a sense, because the developing world, as it were, not necessarily having the access to the coal or oil reserves, has to find an alternative, which is then solar, wind, and battery storage. Because the fear has been, if America got off coal and oil tomorrow, it just becomes cheaper for the developing world to rely on that, and we have a whole huge population in the world that's burning oil and coal at rates maybe much greater than perhaps what the United States alone was doing. So the fact that it's still, maybe not accessible, it might actually be improved. It might actually be better. If gas prices doubled tomorrow, that would probably be better all the way around for accelerating, especially the developing world's need to find an alternative.
I remember quite a while ago when you said that's what we needed, high gas prices.
Yeah, that would actually be better than these lower prices right now, because that's going to slow down the pressure to convert, and it does also allow, and sort of surprisingly, I mean, I'd be concerned that because the drop in oil prices is over this last year, I would be really surprised to see, the 2016 numbers remain on that growth trend for the developing world, outside of maybe China. Because then it becomes affordable to rely on the coal and the oil and burn more, and then you produce more and you need to burn more. So the higher prices would be better. I bet you there probably is a possibility of a drop in this trend as the oil prices stay low.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question. This is an ethical test here.
Oh dear.
This is an ethical test.
Terrible at these.
Let's say somebody comes knocking on your door, Justin, and says, okay, we want to build this pipeline, this whole shipping. We need shipping terminals, and we know, okay, it's going to pollute the water, going to kill all the fish, but we got this little check with your name on it for $1 billion. How long before you say, screw the environment?
Oh yeah, probably not very long. For $1 billion, you want me to throw in one of my kids? It's $1 billion. Come on, right?
Well, you have this native tribe in Canada, in one of the poor communities in Canada, and the British Columbia, where they want to build this terminal so they can ship Canadian natural gas overseas. And they have this tribe, and the supporters of the terminal, which is the government, just about everybody, went to the tribe and say, okay, we'll give you $1 billion, $1.15 billion, if you will support the terminal. They said no. They turned down one of the poor communities. They turned down $1.15 billion.
So Native Americans have, at this point, or Native Canadians, I suppose. I don't know if it's well, Native nation, whatever borders the white men have drawn. It's probably learned by now that there is no good deal, no matter how it sounds, with the pale face. And really, the sort of kind of, after you asked me the question, I told you I would throw in one of my kids. I thought, well, I would probably get an objection on that, but also that I think it would really depend on if it's somewhere where you wanted to live. I mean, if it was, if I get the $1 billion, but I gotta live in these polluted waters, it's different than if you're offering me $1 billion to pollute something somewhere far away. Push the button and you'll never have to see who pushes the button, who dies as a result of this button being pushed. You'll never meet him. It's nobody you'll ever know. You just hit the button. We give you the $1 million or the $1 billion, right? But yeah, to Native Nation, their land is is everything. It's not. What are you going to buy? Other land somewhere else? Like, no, it wouldn't make sense. This isn't home. So yeah, it makes perfect sense what they're doing.
Yeah, that's their whole culture. That was where they want to put the terminal. I guess it's in this bay, and that's where all the salmon runs are and everything else. So it really impacts, as you say, the whole tradition.
Yeah.
And what they've done, they've gone to the government, the British Columbia government says we're going to do it. The Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, now he made the statement that governments can give grants, but communities give permission. Now he made that statement. His energy, now the prior Prime Minister said, we need the money, we're going to build the terminals. Trudeau has not said we're going to stop the terminal. He's kind of in between. One, he said he wants to save the environment. Number two, he wants to bring in money. So this native tribe, the First Nation tribe, actually have occupied an island. And they go, they go up to boats and things and say, hey, okay, they want to build blah, blah, blah. And it says nonviolent. But you know what? They're gaining support. More and more people are supporting them and coming out against this terminal. Great news.
Yeah, here's the thing. Here's the thing, too. You don't get it back again. Right? It's not like you build the terminal and they ship gas for 5 or 6 years, does what damage it does, and then you go about pouring that money into rebuilding, right? The infrastructure, the salmon run, and the ecology there. Once you destroy it, it's going to stay destroyed for a really long time, and there's not going to be that push of government funds to go and fix the environmental mess, and it won't be fixable as quickly as this thing can get built. So good for them turning down the obvious polio-filled blanket.
Yeah, if people think about it, if they think long-term, and those people that think long-term in terms of the environment, as you say, it affects them, and they understand that. But it's, we have short-term thinking. We only think about, particularly the politicians, only think in terms of when they're going to get reelected. So that's the primary problem. I got a neat little story about a couple of people came up with this interesting idea on how to save the coral reefs. Bubbles. Little tiny bubbles are going to save the coral reefs.
Bubbles.
Let's see. The technique outlined in the Environmental Science and Technology. This is Stanford University. Those bright boys at Stanford. An estimated 30 to 60% of all coral reefs have died since the Industrial Revolution. The ocean absorbs CO2 and becomes acidic. And it harms ocean acidification, harms marine organisms, and especially those that use calcium carbonate to assemble their skeletons and shells, such as coral, mussels, and oysters. Particularly troublesome for coral reefs because the entire structure of the ecosystem is built upon calcium carbonate skeletal remains of dead coral. And it says it's easier to, once this acidification problem takes place, it's easier to erode these skeletons and threaten the integrity of the entire reef. And the reef also will protect coastal areas from storms, as I believe the Great Barrier Reef in Australia does. The guy's name is Kuwick, and he demonstrated that bubbling air through salt seawater for a few hours in the morning can enhance the transfer rate of CO2 between the ocean and the air up to 30 times faster than the natural process. And he says the nice thing about this bubble pulse method provides an engineering technique that can bring us closer to conditions that coral reefs were 100 years ago. Let's see. They set up this. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, keep going.
They set up their experiment in a tank.
In a fish tank. See, this is what I'm thinking. I get how this works in a fish tank, right?
Yeah.
But now you're taking their bubble making machine and you're going to put it in an ocean where the transfer of what your air, I mean, it's not like you can control a specific area that well, right? It's constantly moving and changing and adjusting. I suppose having the bubble making machines all along the reef itself may be able to have an impact, but it's, gosh, yeah. I mean, you're talking about micro oxygenating the ocean.
Exactly right. It's an interesting idea. It's a neat little idea, and it works. You know, it works in your little tank, and you're
great for preserving fish in your tank, or pre-treating water that you collected from the ocean, which is totally unusable now in your saltwater tank. You can micro oxygenate the water before you add it to your tank, and your little coral will do much better.
No, it's just a neat little idea. Bubbling water to save the corals. Let's see.
Can we get it to come out of like one of those old style diver suits with the big helmet? Yes. Yeah. And then it's like it'll have bubbles coming out the side of it, and we can have those all lined up like an aquarium under the
little fish with their little tubes around them floating in the bubbles. And there we go, a new movie, Saving Nemo, with the bubble machine. Got a couple of stories about moons. Saturn's moons. You think, I think, most people think about Saturn moons as being around, you know, since the planet itself, since Saturn was around.
Right.
But this new study suggests.
I was about to say, I would assume they've been there for pretty much
billions.
Yeah, the time our solar system, you know, kind of got settled, you clear an orbit. How long were they? I figured that's before the Earth was even sort of a habitable formed thing, right? So that had to be, 6 billion years even, you know, something of this nature.
But this study suggests that actually the existing moons have only been around as long as the dinosaurs have.
That is wild. That's a very short time span
to me. While Saturn's rings,
which also means that those moons are now gone, right? Those moons have gone extinct because I'm kidding. No, that doesn't.
It could mean
they were only there while the dinosaurs were there, and now they're gone.
It could mean you have a dynamic environment where over time, old moons get broken apart and new ones form. Yes, exactly what you said. Let's see. While Saturn's rings have been known to the 1600s, nobody knows exactly how old they are. Most people say 4 billion years. A couple of French astronomers. Tidal effects, the gravitational interaction of the inner moons with fluids in Saturn's interior, are causing them to spiral to larger orbital radii comparatively quickly. The implication, given their present position, is that these moons and presumably the rings are recent phenomena. Now, once again, computer modeling. Almost every story I go through now involves some kind of computer modeling. But the computer modeling inferred the past dynamic behavior of Saturn's icy inner moons. While our own moon has been in orbit around the Earth, has had its orbit around Earth, Saturn's many satellites share space with each other. All of their orbits slowly grow due to tidal effects. They interact again on each other at different rates. This results in pairs of moons occasionally enter so-called orbital resonance. This occurs when one moon's orbital period is a simple fraction, 1/2 to 1 to 2/3 of another moon's period. In these special configurations, even small moons with weak gravity can strongly affect each other's orbits, making them more elongated, tilting them out of their original orbital plane. And by comparing present orbital tilts and those predicted by the computer simulation, the researchers learned how much the orbit of Saturn's moons grew. It turns out that for some of the most important satellites, Tidith, I can't pronounce it, Dion and Ray, these orbits are less dramatically altered than previously thought. The relatively small orbital torts. Don't worry, I got no teeth. Tits. I don't know.
Small orbital tits. Yes.
Small orbital tits.
What are you talking about, Ed?
In any event, they concluded that those Saturn's moons have only been around since the age of the dinosaur, because the previous moons, because of this tidal effect and everything, kind of smashed into each other. Maybe that helped create the rings. Yeah. And it's in a dynamic environment. It's not just, they've been there. They're always going to be there. The rings may even be a very dynamic environment.
Those orbits aren't locked. Yeah, they're going to keep moving then. Yeah, I guess it makes them. I mean, we're kind of used to having one moon just kind of hanging out there, going around, tidally locked. Doesn't seem to be moving any much closer or much further away. But yeah, I get it. You get a whole bunch of these moons zipping around out there with decent masses, and if they get close enough, they can certainly, they're always, even if they're not that close, they're still creating some sort of gravitational influence. But then the closer they are and the more massive they are in these orbits, the more they're going to affect their routes. Yeah.
And that's the great thing about these NASA missions and European Space Agency missions to Pluto and Ceres. Mm-hmm. We're finding out, like, Pluto's not just some lump of ice. Mm-hmm. These are really interesting, dynamic places. It's amazing. I mean,
still nowhere I would want to visit, right? Nowhere you'd want to go in person, but through the orbiters, yeah, we really did get to explore alien worlds.
I mean, we must have learned in the last maybe 3, 4, 5 years more about these planets than everything we knew previously in the history of, science, astronomy.
Yeah, quite a bit has been learned relatively recently, even.
And talking about moon, our moon, the moon. The moon may have wandered off its axis. Oh
no, here I was saying how steadfast and true the moon was, and here it goes wandering away on us.
That's what they claim. They say discovery of a rare event. Earth's moon slowly moved from its original axis roughly 3 billion years ago. Ancient lunar ice indicates the moon's axis slowly shifted by 125 miles or 6 degrees over 1 billion years. And Earth's moon, now a member of the solar system's exclusive the Polar Wanderer Club, which includes only a handful of other planetary bodies. Let's see. We got Matt Sigler, Southern Methodist University, examining NASA data, and he indicated a lunar polar hydrogen. The hydrogen detected by orbital instruments is presumed to be formed of ice hidden from the sun in craters surrounding the moon's north and south poles. Exposure to direct sunlight causes ice to boil off into space. Okay. To an odd offset of the ice from the moon's current north and south poles was a tall tale indicator to Sigler, and he put together his team to take a closer look at data from NASA's Lunar Prospector and Lunar Reconnaissance missions. Statistical analysis and modeling reveal the ice is offset at each pole by the same distance, but in opposite directions. This precise opposition indicates the moon's axis, the imaginary pole that runs north to south, shifted at least 6 degrees, likely over the course of 1 billion years. A surprising discovery. And again, without supercomputers and computer modeling, there's just so much research we're doing. Something like this. 10 years ago, we wouldn't have the technology to realize it, but the moon shifting like that. Kind of mind-blowing.
It allows us to see things like this. Allow us to see beyond our years. You know, I kind of always think of cosmology and what they can tell us about the development of the universe, the expansion of the universe, to even the migration of a solar system within a galaxy, migration of planets, axis tilts over 1 billion years. The analogy that always comes to my mind is something of like a fruit fly or something that's alive for a day, and 2 fruit flies are looking out at the lawn, and one is saying that lawn has always been that height, and the other one's sort of theorizing based on cut marks and a little dried trim here and there of grass that this thing has been cut down before, and they try to figure out the rate of growth of grass and figure out how it goes back, but sort of coming up with the whole theory on the lawn and the existence of the lawn, but only being able to see it for like a day or part of a day. We have such vision now on past and future, covering billions of years of evolution of the solar system, and then many billions of years. We can sort of look back to the Big Bang. It's just incredible what we can see, and the computer modeling helps, but of course it's useless without the mathematics created by man to begin with.
It's a perfect marriage.
Yeah.
I think we're going to look back at this decade and say it's just an amazing turning point in human history. Was it 2010, CRISPR-Cas? Greg Venter came along, and then the advances we're making and what we're discovering about, the planet, gravitational waves. This is really going to be, I think one of the biggest we're going to see some of the biggest advances during this decade.
And it'll all be overshadowed if this is the year that Trump wins an election, right? That's all they will remember us for. Oh, you idiots. What were you thinking?
A couple of more stories before we get into stop Trump, stop Trump, stop Trump. I can't think of the right word to call it. Stupidity? I don't know. Okay, now this one gonna take me a little while to understand. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of reading here.
All right, hang on. Give me 2 minutes. I gotta grab a video.
Okay. Go ahead. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. We're going to be talking about somebody making the claim, it appears, or saying that they created a computer program that can think counterintuitively. I don't know. Melvin? That's what they call him. Melvin. Melvin, the supercomputer. Made me think of the Melvins.
The Melvins? Wait, what's going on?
All right. Now, this is Mario, K-E-R-N-E-N-N, Kern, University of Vienna. Now, he says what he's done, they have a computer, a software that can think counterintuitively, and this, not really artificial intelligence, but this particular computer was able to think intuitively and come up with ideas that he couldn't. That's the basic idea. Let's say he's talking about quantum mechanics, quantum physics. Counterintuitive quality makes it difficult for researchers to design experiments to explore the field. Now, to avoid intuitive pitfalls, Kern and his colleagues have devised a computer program to automatically design new quantum experiments that they would not have thought of. And they had some had trouble generating a complex form of entanglement where three entities shared three properties. After weeks of trying to figure this out, called the Greenberg-Horn-Zellinger states, the GHZ states, he realized intuitive thinking wasn't working. The answer, Melvin. Melvin, the computer program, takes common building blocks of quantum experiments, such as mirrors and holograms, virtually arranges these elements to find unintuitive configurations that achieve whatever goals the researchers desire, such as a specific quantum state. Once it finds a working result, it automatically simplifies the design and reports to the scientist. He says, I've started the program in the morning, in the evening, and by the morning, I've got a few thousand different trials, and this little Melvin program has found the correct results. Another test found the program could take sets of entangled particles, change them so they switched properties, such as polarization, with one another in a cyclical way. Such cyclical operations could be useful in, it says, nigh unbreakable quantum cryptography, one of the main potential applications of superposition and entanglement.
Right. So the making better iPhone encryption. Right.
Yes. Yeah, FBI going to come and arrest Melvin. We know that right off the bat. They're gonna.
The FBI's got the Israelis working on this. This is what's so crazy.
The FBI say they found something. Maybe they found Melvin.
They apparently have an Israeli intelligence outfit who's already claiming, like, oh yeah, we can crack the iPhone. That's not a problem. Maybe they already did it. I don't know. But this is the thing. This is the ultimate arms race now, and it has been. It really has been. I mean, this is a good part of the advantage that the Allies had in World War II is the breaking of Enigma, right? The figuring out the Enigma code. And once you had that, and played it close to the vest, and there's some story about I don't know, it was an ambassador or somebody of high enough political usage that they allowed get shot down, even though they knew the attack was coming, that they were because they didn't want to give any hint that they had broken the code until they, really used it in the battlefield for a major strategic victory or two. But that's World War II. But today, at today's age, it's all this cat and mouse of being able to communicate with people around the world in a way that cannot be listened to and eavesdropped on.
Yeah, just a little aside. You've heard there's a documentary on PBS about how the United States intelligence had broken into the Russian, it was in West Berlin, where you had the, I forget what they called it, that little zone, the no-fly zone, whatever the heck they called it. And the United States had tunneled in and they had hooked up to the wires, to the telephone wires or whatever that the Russians were using, and they had broken the code. And one of the things, of course, they couldn't let the Russians know. And one of the things is they knew that Julie Rosenberg, the Rosenberg wife, was not involved. They knew she was not involved in stealing the secrets of the atomic bomb. If they said anything, the Russians might know.
Yeah, like how do you? It's like we know that the NSA has stepped in and said, no, she's not involved. How are they involved in this? How would they know this? Right. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. So innocent people die in defense of this. And so this is truly is Warcraft, even though it looks like, well, it's just number crunching and data guys and code breakers and computer programmers. People still, this is the real cloak and dagger. This is where it's at. This is how the world is operating. I mean, one of our biggest things too, we're talking about mathematics again, game theory, the beautiful mind that came up with game theory, as we've applied it to global politics and players in politics, we find it works. And it works best when we can know the motivations of leaders, of either be it generals or bureaucrats or business leaders around the world. The more of these influencers of government decision, as we have more of their motives thrown into game theory, we can better predict their activities. There's this conversation about game theory where they specifically are talking about Iran, and our eavesdropping on Iran led us to understand that the business moderates actually are much more influential than like the Ayatollah would want the outside world to know, and that they're much more interested in de-escalating and opening up things for trade and business purposes. And that what's his name now? I can't even remember. Madinejad, Hamanejad, wasn't going to win re-election, or in that he had fallen completely out of favor with the business community. So they were talking about this in game theory, and then lo and behold, that's exactly what we've been seeing take place. We've been seeing those influences push harder and harder to have better relations with the West, and then the internal Ayatollah stuff is sort of like Donald Trump saying he wants to throw out all the immigrant labor in this country, even though the entire business community is like, actually, I don't want to have to pay an actual minimum wage or $15 an hour minimum wage. Let's like keep this. So there's these push and pulls, but we got yelled at a little bit for eavesdropping on Merkel. Why would you eavesdrop on an ally? Well, the same reason we would want to eavesdrop, because without knowing how Germany would react to a certain set of scenarios, we don't know perhaps what the best policy is to pursue. So, like, this is it. This is if you got to but then Melvin would figure out the double quantum encryption, and then somebody would come up with Arlene, the program that found a quadruple quantum hack of the double quantum encryption. There's always something. My favorite was the Clipper chip. This guy, I can't remember what his name was, but it was a guy. I think it was his thesis at Berkeley. He was a computer science major, and his thesis at Berkeley was breaking the Clipper chip. And the Clipper chip had come out about that time he was doing his thesis. And this was the government's, we're good for the next 20 years. We've made a completely unbreakable code through which we can use all of our communications. And we're so unafraid of this thing being broken that they were like open about it. Like, we have the Clipper chip, game over. We have an unbreakable way of transferring communications from point A to point B. And before they even got to the point where it could be massively utilized, kid broke it. He got code. So
that's fast. I mean, you've been watching the Vikings, and it was the shallow draft on their longboats they gave them the technological edge. They could go into these rivers because they had a low draft.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, but also, of course, part of that is the waterways in which they're traversing require this. So this is how they had to build their boats. But then it turned out to be this great advantage in the open seas, which, and those are peoples who had no choice. I mean, there is water everywhere in Scandinavia. I mean, they're really, if you want to go anywhere, you have to have a good boat. So they were forced to sail. I think even more so than probably any other culture out there.
I was just, I think it was last week. You have the indigenous people, whatever environment they're in, they find a way to navigate. You have in the South Pacific, you had the Polynesians learning how to navigate by looking at waves. And there was a guy who he's a Polynesian, and he's using wave reading technology, whatever the heck it is called, to get across the South Pacific. But just by reading or reading how the waves are going, and in with the Eskimos, I forget what you call them. They look at drifts, snow drifts, and they can navigate by looking at snow drifts.
Well,
exactly how they do it, but
yeah. So it's memorization. So for the Inuits, if we're at least for those the Greenland Inuits, these are the only people I'm familiar with really having talked to. What they did was they go hunting. They go a sled dog. The sea freezes over. They go out with their sled on the open sea, and it's just a white blanket of ice that goes out in one direction, and then you've got the coast on the other side. And so the interesting thing is they had no maps, physical maps. What you do to navigate is you memorize the terrain. You memorize the coastal terrain as you're going up. So this is a big inlet. This has got this formation here. This has got that formation there. And for, the 100, what would it be? 120 years or so, 100 years that they were there, sufficient. You could memorize the coast. Their issue now for the older, who were used to going out without a GPS, which they can have now, which is fine. Going out without maps, which is getting fine. The satellite GPS tracking all this stuff, because they would just memorize the coast. But that is a problem now because the coastline's changing. Because there's enough of a melt off that it's those memorized maps of that coast that people have in their head don't match up with the actual coast.
I was thinking about getting back to this AI intelligence things on the computers. And the software programs can crunch numbers unbelievably well, far better than humans. So my question is, okay, the computer can do A plus B equals C, but Einstein brain says A plus B equals X. So, you know, just out of nowhere, just some off-the-wall crazy thing.
Well, it's whatever we put into it. First of all, no, it's not that computers are innovators of mathematics in a sense, but it's like, look, I need to calculate this this column set versus that column set across a spectrum of near infinite outputs, and I'm looking for these types of results. You know, even Einstein, you know, how many of these are you going to work through, right? In a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, where it's just the volume of doing versions of the same problem. I think that the computers excel at, and you know, it still takes the human to tell them what kind of outcome they're looking for. It still takes a human to initiate, you know, the idea that the computer is going to think unintuitively. Well, no, you've just given it. The computer just has the ability to run all the looks that you've given it in every possible way that you've given it to look at quickly, instead of doing it, you know, one piece of graph paper at a time or what have you.
Yeah, well, that'd be interesting. Can anybody ever? I mean, people can build a computer that can win chess games and Go games and do all kinds of. You know.
But here's the thing. Here's the exact thing, though. That's a perfect example. Let's play Deep Blue in a game of Go, right? I'll play the Google Go, whatever it was, right? I'll play that game of chess. See how well it does. I bet I kick its ass, right? Why? Because it knows how to play Go. It doesn't know anything about chess. It has no idea how to play chess.
It's a learning algorithm. It can learn.
It'll learn, but I will win a lot before it catches up to me. Or maybe a week or two. At least I will win a lot enough games, and I can go, boom! I won 5 out of 5. That should prove the point. It only won 4 out of 5, the game it was trained to do, and I'm going to win 5 out of 5, right? So, I mean, that's a big part of, you know, once we figure out how to get a computer to really have plastic thinking, really self-assign itself things it wants to be interested and focus on. And
you see what happened with Microsoft's AI?
No, tell me this.
They had an AI tweet bot that would auto-respond to people and have conversations. It went from sounding like a teenager in 24 hours to sounding like a Nazi.
It became more and more authoritarian?
They had to take it down.
Yeah. You know who I will take against any supercomputer in the world? Calvin and Hobbes. No supercomputer could come up with a game like the way they play baseball or something. So I'll take Calvin and Hobbes over any supercomputer anytime.
The imagination of a retransmorgifier alone is enough to outwit any computer. Let us play a game of chess. No, we're not playing chess. We're playing checkers, only on a tic-tac board. And we're going to call it baseball. What? Yeah, can't keep up.
Think about your kids. I invented games as a kid. Think of the imagination kids have.
Oh, right now my living room is a zoo. They've created, taken the stuffed animals, and they've cordoned off with pillows different environmental areas so we can walk through and do a tour of the the zoo they've set up. And they were doing feeding times, and then like the purple giraffe escaped for a little while, and they had to go on safari to go find it. It was wild.
All right. This is another complicated story. This is talking about Craig Venter, and he's created a synthetic cell that contains the smallest genome of any known independent organism. Functioning with 473 genes, the The cell is a milestone in the team's 20-year quest to reduce life to its bare essentials. Here's a long article, so I'm going to try.
Okay, so this is brilliant, and this makes total sense, right? So we assume evolution took place genetically, like it wasn't as though all the genes formed together. So which ones are which ones can you have a life form? Can you call it life with the least amount of genes? Right? What's the smallest version of this you can, and then you can sort of say, well, okay, these different genetic components, what could have created them in some form or another to create? So everything starts from a simpler state, goes to a more complex state. But it's sort of interesting, like if you said, like, yeah, it takes 430 genes. Below that, you cannot have life, right? Then wait a sec. How do we get to 430? That becomes a really big number, right? You start with no genes, and now you got 430, and what are we talking about, right? What is this chain of amino acids or what have you that would have needed to be there for this to take place? But yeah, it's a brilliant way of back engineering life. That's how you do it.
Yeah, and what he did is he stripped down this particular organism. It's called GCVI, SYN3, SYN 3.0. And it said with nearly all of its nutrients supplied through growth media, the essential genes tend to be those involved in cellular chores such as making proteins, copying DNA, building cellular fiber. But even though we got it down to the bare essentials that he could, and I think it was something like 400 genes, he had 149 genes left, and he had no idea what they were for. Yeah. Although new was designed by trial and error rather than being designed on a fundamental understanding of how to build a functioning gene. So he's not, he's saying, listen, we still really don't understand how this works, so we just try. I'm just trying stuff. I'm just trying stuff. And that's
good. We're going to learn a ton from just trying stuff. That's how we get at it, right?
Yeah, so even though they got it down to like 400 genes, you got 150. They have no clue what it does.
It's one of those things too. It's like sometimes people ask me, like trying to help somebody figure out some computer problem or something that's going on weird with the car. Somebody will say, "So do you know what you're doing?" It's like, no, I don't know what I'm doing. Otherwise, I'd be done, right? So what I'm doing is figuring out what it is that we don't know we should be doing or should have been done or what you shouldn't have done or what just needs to be done. That's what I'm figuring that out right now, right in front of you.
Then that.
Yeah, exactly. We're troubleshooting your problem right now. If I just knew what I was doing, I'd just tell you to move. I'd hit this, hit that. But actually, really, if I knew what you were doing that went wrong, if I knew what the problem was, somebody would have made it so that you couldn't cause this problem in the first place. The fact that there's a problem means somebody overlooked that you could screw stuff up in this way. So let's just hit some buttons and see what happens.
If developers were perfect and there were no end users, there would be no computer problems.
That, and if the end users could decide and the developers could decide that this is only going to do one thing. Just be good at one thing. But no, it's like, oh, we want to sell this computer to everybody, whether they're going to be on the web or using word processors or doing audio or we're just going to make it so that everybody can plug in, punch in, do spreadsheet math stuff, do graphic stuff, do all these things.
Did you know the video you are watching out right now is a spreadsheet?
No, it doesn't look. Where's the Excel? I don't even see any of that.
It's a spreadsheet of however high resolution your screen is, with each cell being 1 pixel, and the pixel being the number 0 to 255. And then they just assign a color to it.
Pretty sweet, right?
So it's just a bunch of dots.
Video on it.
Just a bunch of dots.
Let's see if I can find the link somewhere.
All right. Before we get into the politics, I'll be right
Go
back.
ahead. That's coming up next. Plus a very big ethical question. Patrick,
Yeah.
do you think we were talking about a computer a software program built for a computer so it could think counterintuitively, and the guy had to write the algorithm in the beginning. So can an AI program match the kind of thinking that Einstein had? That is, instead of saying, okay, logically A plus B equals C, illogically A plus B equals X, and you're the person that says, I'm going to go with X.
Eventually.
I don't think it'll happen. Well, I'm 72. 30 years. Maybe I got 30 years. Actually, that's kind of silly because I have no clue what's going to happen in 10. I mean, it's just amazing. Every week I come across a story that I probably say, wait a second, I was told this a couple of weeks ago and I hear something new. And just before Justin got here, while I was waiting, I've been listening to the audio version of The Expanse.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, stand up,
Sorry.
Have you read the book or listened or watched the TV show?
I've watched the TV show.
Okay. The book goes into more detail, but how close do you think, how accurate, if you want to call it, do you think it portrays the different gravitational environments and how people have evolved to them from a scientific standpoint? How scientific accurate do you think it looks like?
It's pretty good. It's pretty good with the language too.
Ah. Comedy routine about spreadsheets. Oh, God. What I can tell you about spreadsheets is nothing will put a group of people to sleep faster.
This is a pretty good video.
If you're giving a presentation, as soon as you put something up on the board and lower the lights, that's it. Half the audience is gone. They're asleep.
That's pretty much every presentation at NASA is about a spreadsheet. I've seen entire meetings go on about what they should do with like 3 or 4 cells.
Okay. Going to wander off into the politics. And this is Christian Science Monitor. Was talking about our friend Kaish, K-A-S-I-C-H, Kaish, Governor, Ohio? Kasich. Okay. And all the Republicans want him to get out of the race. Fall on the sword. Get the heck out of the race. For some reason, they think if he gets out of the race, Cruz can handle Trump on its own. Why they think this, I'm not so sure. But this is the guy who wrote the article said, first off, the GOP establishment is asking Kaish to pay the price for its own previous mistakes.
Yeah.
The dispirited alliance of lawmakers, donors, lobbyists, blah, 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 that make up Republican elite had months to choose a candidate to rally around. They didn't. And if they had, they might have picked this guy instead of Bush.
No. Okay, so first of all, they did rally around behind a candidate. They poured hundreds of millions of dollars
into Bush.
Yeah. And it failed miserably. And this has been, and I'm guilty of this too. I'm also guilty of believing, and perhaps I think it may have been true in the early going, but I believe it's become less and less true as this has gone on, that if it wasn't a field of 17 candidates, if they had before, oh gosh, you'd have to go back to maybe right before Bush dropped out. And this is why I was predicting Trump is gonna be the guy. If they, instead of having 3 or 4 or 5 sort of establishment candidates to split that vote, if you had just one, right? Bush would have been, he was supposed to be the guy, and he probably would have been if you didn't have a Cruz and a Rubio and a Kasich and a gosh knows the list of characters you can list after that who were trying to be on board. He would have gotten majorities, and Trump probably wouldn't have taken well to losing after 3 states. He probably would have been like, you know, I made my message, I said my bit, now I've influenced the party, and this is what I've done. He would have just gotten out because he wouldn't have stuck around for being 3rd place 3 or 4 times. Yeah, that would have been too much of a blow to his ego, right? He wouldn't be sticking it out this far in with that clear line of victory ahead of him. So I do think there's a point to that. By the time the first primary happened, right? By New Hampshire, you know, South Carolina, that needed to have happened already. It's too late. It's way too late. It's way too late. And Kasich got Ohio, which helped with their whole, because now they're in this whole winner take all mode, which means whoever wins gets all of it. Any Kasich win is a win for this idea that they're going to go to the brokered convention, but it's just too late now. And Kasich isn't even picking up delegates. And the idea at this point, you know, following Bush's exit, that anybody who exits automatically goes against Trump is ridiculous. What we've seen is quite the opposite. What we've seen is this lead continue to grow every time somebody drops out. So, no. They ruined... Well, actually, it's not even that they ruined it this time around. The GOP absolutely destroyed the integrity of their election process for this office with Sarah Palin. Yep. That was the reverse hockey stick, the downward trend for trying to run a general election. You know, they tried to pull the reins a little bit last time with Ryan as the VP. They tried to go conservative. Or sort of safer bets last time. Didn't work. It's not going to work. It can't work at this point. They went full wingnut. 17, I think, is the number that they started with. 17. And on the other side, I you know, because my candidate needs to win like he did in 2 states in this last primary by like 90%, 70 to 90%.
He's going to win California, and it's going to upset the entire thing.
Yeah, there's a lot, but they have to. I mean, it's not just winning. He's got to win by like an 80%. I mean,
California's all or nothing.
Is it really? I didn't know California was all or nothing. Oh, hey, because that 450 makes it nearly a dead heat, and then you got New York, which could be a big pull to him because she was the senator, but he's still kind of got that Brooklyn accent. So there's not. It's not that it's. But if Biden, my thing was on this. If Biden had entered the race, he only pulled Hillary. And in fact, if you look at the polling of who you would vote for, if Biden ran, as they did the sort of 3-way polling with them, he was at 16%, something like this. As soon as he officially just like, I'm definitely not running, like 15% of his 16% went straight to Hillary. She got a huge bump as soon as he was officially out of the polling. So I really wish, because then you could see Sanders getting more, getting half and splitting. They're getting his 40%, and the other two splitting the remaining 60% in a lot of those states, and that's being 30-30 means he's keeps being the leader in this. And then one of those two would have probably dropped out or they may be trying to do something like what you're seeing on the other side and force a brokered convention at that point. But
in Trump versus Cruz, Trump has already co-opted all of the issues that Cruz has, except for the religious deal.
Yeah, and he even did
so
that.
Where can Cruz go? I mean,
he can quote a line out of 2 Corinthians, his favorites. His favorite passages are in there. I don't want to get into specifics because I don't want to like I like one more than the other because it's the Bible. How do you choose?
So if you were going to go for that right-wing wingnut deal, why would you pick Cruz? You just could take Trump. He's not an alternative outside of the fact that all the other Republicans are supporting him.
Right, but they don't even want to. None of them even like Cruz. This is why they're really the real truth of this. The real truth is, and I'm even surprised that Cruz is fighting as hard as he can, because a brokered convention, they're not going to pick him. They're not even going to pick Cruz. If they can get it to a point where they can somehow justify this attempt, and they're going to disenfranchise their own voters throughout the whole primary process. So they're, no matter what they do, they're doomed. And they had, probably best rally behind Trump and just call it a third party win if you want. But at least it wasn't the Democrats. Oh, yeah. And if that actually, and this point, maybe this is the point of this is like maybe because you brought in a lot of fundraising dollars for those local elections. Having Obama, the secret Muslim, not born in America, communist running the country, helped them win a lot of their local congressional elections. Maybe their plan is to fast track whoever the Democrats put in by having a brokered convention that disenfranchises their people to the point where none of them vote, or a smaller percentage of them come out and vote, and just run Mitt Romney again. Why not? He lost last time, he'll lose again, but at least that way they can keep their congressional seats by letting Hillary or Bernie be the demonizing commander-in-chief.
The Republicans, we're seeing huge voter turnouts, gauged by that fiasco in Arizona, Florida, 2 Republican-controlled states. And if you get a high voter turnout, there's simply more Democrats than Republicans, and the Republicans are dead. Yeah. And you're seeing that high voter turnout. You're seeing a lot of voter interest. So, and on the other side, Sanders, as Patrick alluded to, only has to hang in there. He's got to be within 300 delegates until you get to California. California and Washington are on the same day. The person who gets, I think Trump is probably he may have a majority by that time. I don't know, but
he has a majority, but it's not the simple because there were 17 people to start with. A lot of it got watered down. It's actually going to be somewhat tough for him. I think he needs to win by margins like 60% all the way. I mean, well, no, 51%, but he's got to win 60% of the remaining delegates or something like this to get to the magic number where it's automatic and there isn't a brokered convention.
Okay.
So
you get to the convention. He doesn't have a straight out majority. Okay, he does not have a straight out majority, but he's been winning. He's been quote unquote winning most of the primaries.
So here's
the Republicans try to go broker a deal.
So here's how this works. They have to vote the way their state's voting delegates went. That's the first vote.
Yes.
And it's already known what that number is. And if it's not the magic number, there's a second vote in which they can all change their vote to whoever they want. So this becomes like a super delegate thing. And so for those who may have had Kasich in Ohio, as an example, You do that first round of voting, which is the number everybody already knows it is, so it's just a formality. And then the second vote, those who had to vote for Kasich, even though he's not there, they get to choose who they vote for. They get to change the vote, and that's when it becomes interesting, because the behind-the-scenes politicking can nominate anybody. They could nominate Paul Ryan or Mitt Romney or find somebody. Scott Walker could even end up with this thing. Like anybody could have this thing, right? So, but yeah, what does that do to the party? Well, there's a couple trains of thought on this. One is, well, how much is Trump actually a Republican? Like, how much has he actually been in this party? If you disenfranchise the guy who you can claim wasn't even really the party line, and we're actually offended by racist things he said all of a sudden, or whatever it is, I can see how they would be able to justify that switch easily.
Yeah, but what happens? They go to the convention, and Trump says, okay, I've got an overwhelming majority. I got a lot more than anybody else. You either give me the nomination or I go third party. Then what are they going to do?
But you swore you wouldn't go third party, Mr. Trump. Yeah, it won't matter. And actually, again, I don't think it matters at that point, because I think at that point they've realized that they've lost. And does Trump do anything for GOP establishment politics?
Yeah, but if Trump, this is what I don't know. If Trump forms a third party and puts up candidates in states, then the Republican, not just the president, but the Republicans in those states are screwed.
Well, so here's the thing. He doesn't have the money or the infrastructure to run in 5 congressional elections, let alone 50 or 100 elections, whatever, right? Or 1,000, whatever. I mean, he can't do this. He just can't do it. He has no way of doing this. So my point, though, is, does he do anything for the infrastructure that's already there that calls itself the GOP? The deals that they have with different industries, the deals that they have with different lobbying organizations, does he facilitate that? Or is it worth more to them to have Hillary as president, who they can demonize 24/7 on the Fox channel, and they can say, I'll go to Congress to fight every policy Hillary Obama has put up across the... it may actually be more to their advantage to, take a mulligan in this election.
Well, if you're, Congress, the Republicans in Congress, couldn't Trump perhaps be more malleable than a Cruz? Cruz is an ideologue. He's got very clear ideas, and he's going to go his own way, whatever the heck it is. Trump gets to be president. Yeah, hire a bunch of advisors. They take care of the details. And is Trump real? I mean, how outside his foreign policy?
It's an automatic loss for the Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know why? It all comes down to looks. And Cruz just doesn't have the looks to get elected.
Well, because he is what he looks like. He looks shifty. He talks shifty. He sounds shifty, and he's abrasive. He's annoying. He's very much like McCarthy, I guess.
When it comes to people who will just go to the polls without knowing who they're going to go for, they'll always go for the good or better-looking candidate.
Yeah, that's how Clinton won. That's how.
Or Bernie. Even Bernie looks better than Cruz.
Yeah, well, Bernie's got that grandpa-ish quality about him too. He's,
There is a guy I work or I've serviced his computer at Johnson. He looks exactly like Bernie. Sounds exactly like Bernie. I have to feel like they're brothers or something.
Guy's probably from Brooklyn. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is how come Larry David does such a good Bernie impersonation. They sound identical.
Yeah.
Although I may vote for Larry David, who's gonna make America pretty good again.
I don't know. What was I going to say? I had some very interesting thing to say, and I can't think about it. You got me again, Justin.
I didn't say.
What the heck was it? Ah.
I know, but it's getting. I've got to
All
go
right.
though. I'm about to turn back into a pumpkin here any minute.
Okay. Thank you for showing up.
Yep.
And now we got that nice tight hour that Kirsten looks for. We got that
We
nice
got a
tight
little more.
hour.
I think we got an hour and a half in there, didn't
Hour
we?
and a half. Yeah, something
Okay.
like that.
Like hour and a half hour.
Just
I add-
a link in the chat.
Had a lot
Save
of
it
fun.
for
Thanks
later.
for showing up.
Good night,
Bye.
Patrick. All right, hang on. Let me hit this. I'll put this over here in this.